raise a child to have confidence, to be self-motivated, to have grit, to know how to deal with his or her own anxiety? This is often questions. These are often questions that I receive from listeners, from you guys. When you join my Facebook group, if you sign up for one of my free challenges on my website, just head on over to heatherchauvin.com. After you sign up, there is this option to go into a Facebook group. So when you go into the Facebook group, I ask, what question do you have for me? And when it pertains to parenting, these are often the questions that I receive of how do I help my child with their anxiety, self-motivation, self-esteem. And these were the questions that I wanted answered as a parent when I started this process, back in the day when I was a social worker. And, I was watching my son who had absolutely no control over his anxiety. And it was worried me. I was terrified. And so since then, that's almost 8 years ago, I have been working with women around the world, diving into helping your children, helping you live the life that you want. But to be honest, I keep coming back like, okay, well, how do I help these people solve these problems? And the truth is, you have to know how to solve these problems in your own life, in your own being. And to be honest, I don't want to tell you that as the answer. I don't. I wish there was another way. It doesn't matter how much research I do. It doesn't matter how many professionals I talk to, the gurus who write the books, the experts, the quote-unquote experts. It all comes back to tools and strategies. But guys, how can you teach your child how to drive a car if you don't know how to drive a car? How can you teach your child to speak another language if you do not know how to speak the other language? But what happens is, what do you tell yourself? I don't want to. I don't want to do this. That's hard. That's hard work. That's really uncomfortable. I don't want to go there, right? So you have to. I'm sorry. You have to. Parenting is a privilege, and it is a damn hell of a big responsibility too. And one of the responsibilities that you clearly don't have to sign up for is telling people that if you want your child to become anything, you have to learn that skill, learn that tool, learn that strategy, and be willing to do the work on yourself so that you can then teach it to your child or the children around you. Because as you and I can both see, the old way of being and the old way of parenting is no longer working. So we'll talk about that in a second. Let's talk about helping your child be self-motivated, how to deal with their anxiety, and all of these fun things. If you've been following me for a while, you might think I'm repeating myself because I'm starting to think that I am. But let's talk about the self-motivation for 1 second. I was with some individuals the other day, and, these are people old enough to be my parents. And they looked at me and said, "Oh, good for you. You're doing well, Heather. You're so self-motivated. You're motivated. You're confident." And I laughed hysterically. And they're like, "What's so funny?" And I said, Fear is a really good motivator." And they looked at me. And they're like, "What do you mean by that?" I said, the only reason why I am where I am today is because I used to be, not so much now. I used to be. My whole business model, my whole business started on the fear of who my children will become if I didn't do the work. That was it. That's why I started my business. That's why I created the program, Teach Your Kid to Meditate, because I was freaking terrified that if I didn't figure my shit out and feel in control of my life, that my children were going to be 40 years old, living in my basement for the rest of their lives, and I was screwed. So fear is a great motivator, but it doesn't have to keep you motivated. Right? Sometimes I see people say, like, I need to hustle right now. I need to push because I need money. And yes, when you're living in survival mode, you need to hustle a little bit, right? To be able to pay the bills, to be able to put food on the table for your kids. But there comes a time and a place where you don't need to do that anymore, and you can start scaling, and you can make your life easier. You can work smarter, not harder. So self-motivation. There is a big issue, guys, huge issue in the parenting industry where, they're not even calling them helicopter parents anymore. Now they're calling them lawnmower parents. I don't even know if you've heard this. So helicopter parenting is when you are just hovering over your child. I see this all the time at birthday parties. I see this everywhere my children go, right? Just parents hovering, stressed out, burnt out, overwhelmed. Like, oh, let me get that for you. Oh, let me do that. Don't do that, little Johnny. Oh, gee, Now, what they're talking about, lawnmower parents are worse than helicopter parents, because these parents literally try to do everything in their power to cut down the path for their children and cut everything out. No, there's no failure, right? It's like, I've created this for you. I've done this for you. All you is turnkey. You don't have to do anything. I've done all the hard work for you. What I'm starting to realize is the shit show, the resiliency, the grit, that is when you make your children work for something. And yes, it's really hard when, your children go to school and they see other kids having things or opportunities and they have to work for it. But this is where you are teaching children about grit and self-motivation. And in the moment, yes, they're not going to like you. They're going to say, you're mean, you're this, you're not like everybody else. But guys, your 8-year-old does not need to have a cell phone. I don't care if they walk home from school. I'm pretty sure in 20 years, it's going to be legal to microchip your children. I'm not kidding. Anxiety is a big issue. It is one of the leading mental health conditions affecting children today. Why is that? Do you think you, as a parent, with your energy and how you show up, has anything to do with that? Maybe. I know that when my children are more anxious, if I'm off my game, and my middle son, who has a little bit of sensory processing stuff, if our house is in utter chaos and I'm off, he goes from 0 to 60 just like that. He's a great gauge of what is happening in the house because he is so highly sensitive. That said, your children's emotions are not your emotions. But just like you are affected by the weather or the flow of traffic, or, when somebody else walks in the room and you're like, oh, she's so negative, or he's so angry, and I can feel their anger being projected out. I don't like being around them. Your children are affected by your energy as well. So if you are hiding something in your life, if you're not being authentic to yourself, if you're trying to mold and shift your way out into the world to please everybody else, you are eventually going to crack. So, how do you teach a child to be self-motivated? How do you teach them to have grit? How do you teach them to deal with their own anxiety? How do you teach them all of these things? Over the past 8 years of diving down the rabbit hole of functional medicine, integrative medicine, holistic medicine, energy healing, coaching, and forward-thinking paradigm in parenting, and looking at what's not working, I constantly feel like I am swimming upstream when I'm speaking this message. Some people get it, and some people still say to me, how do I get my child to listen to me? And I ask you, are you listening to your child? Are you listening to yourself? We are not listening to ourselves. And we're trying to do everything and give to our children. But the one thing that we forgot, the big missing key, the missing ingredient that is going to click all the pieces together, that is going to allow you to take your power back, is doing the fucking uncomfortable work that you don't want to do, that nobody else can do for you. If you want to teach a child grit, you have to be willing to get gritty. I don't even know if that's a word. If you want to teach a child self-motivation, you better damn well know how to deal with resistance. Because if you don't understand your own resistance, if you don't understand how that ugly demon makes its way in your own life, then how the heck are you supposed to have those conversations with your children? How many times, depending on how old your child is, if you've had the conversation at the schools, I know he can do it. He has so much potential, but he's not using his full potential. Now, if you put a mirror in front of your face and said that, would it come smacking you back in the face? Who is his role model for showing him what it looks like to live in your potential? Who is her role model to show her what confidence looks like, what self-motivation looks like, what perseverance looks like, what grit looks like, what feeling in control of your anxiety looks like? Tapping into your body wisdom, understanding how your thoughts will play tricks on you. Who is going to teach her that? It will not be the therapist that you bring her to once a week that charges you $100 every single time. And then when you leave that therapist's office or that workshop or whatever, going, what did you learn? I don't want to talk about it. Your children are here to teach you something. They are here to wake you up. They are here to show you your true potential. Becoming your best self is the greatest gift that you can give to them. When your child looks at you and says, Mom, I am so proud of you. And I think about all those nights that maybe I missed, bedtime, or I was unable to read, or I missed bath time. But I was there to get them on the bus and off the bus, and I was able to run to the school if needed. Or maybe I could take a Friday afternoon off and meet them for lunch. You cannot be everything to your children, but you can be everything for yourself. You can become the person that you've been looking for. Okay, my rant is over. I'm off my soapbox. So, I'm probably going to get a little angry. Not angry, passionate. It's not anger, it's passion. About these questions that you guys are asking me. How do you teach a child grit? How do you teach them to be self-motivated? How do you teach them anxiety? Ask yourself, how do I do these things myself? And if you have no freaking clue, then you got to learn those skills, baby. Talk soon, ladies.